The problem is that you believe you are separate, and that one belief is making you and the world sick. Stay with me. A few days ago, I caught myself in a trap. I was developing this idea that I thought was absolutely profound, and it was something about the relationship between man and his universe. The universe gives us air, food, provisions, and we give it something back in form of creativity, and that enhances the evolution of consciousness. I thought it was absolutely profound until I realized that that idea in itself reinforces a split that shouldn't exist. I was using a dualist perspective to ideate, so let me offer you a model that broke the analogy open for me. Think of the universe not as a being, but as a body, as something vast and infinite, as a breathing, living organism. Inside that body, there are cells. Some of those cells are planets, some of those cells are stars, and some of those cells are you. Now ask yourself this question: does a liver cell interact with the bloodstream? And you might say yes. But when we call it an interaction, it's like saying a wave interacts with the ocean. But the thing is, a cell doesn't just meet the blood, it breathes the blood. A cell is a part of the bloodstream's path. The movement of the cell within the bloodstream isn't an exchange between two separate things. It's a symbiotic interaction within one body. So where am I going with this? The problem is that you think you are a small, separate player in a huge, giant, scary world. And when a system genuinely believes that it is separate from the whole, it acts very differently. When a system believes it is separate from the whole, hoarding makes sense. Greed makes sense. Contraction makes sense. Fear makes sense. Because from that perspective, survival really does seem uncertain. But when you realize that you are a cell within the body of existence itself, your survival reflex will weaken. You stop praying to source and you start listening as source. You realize that you are not trying to attract abundance. You are abundance localized in a specific point in time and space, observing itself. Okay, so let's bring this down from the scale of the universe into the scale of the energy body. The chakra system is basically a bridge between the microcosm and the macrocosm that reflects universal energy within the individual. And your root chakra happens to be the first receptacle of energy in your system. So what happens when the root chakra is reflecting contraction of the individual? It contracts right back by holding onto and seizing energy. And that's contraction, that's holding energy, starves the sacral that sits right on top of the root chakra. It starves it of the energy it needs to actually create. This is why it might look like I conflate the root chakra and the sacral chakra. I don't. I just see how the contraction of one system affects the rest of the system. People tend to treat sacral chakra problems as only originating from the sacral, but from my experience and observations, it always ties back to the roots, because the root is contracting and not releasing energy that is supposed to travel up the other chakras. In this sense, you can say that a creative block is a circulation problem, not an isolated chakra problem. And when you start thinking this way, you stop looking at parts in isolation and you start looking at the behavior of the whole system. Now, let's take the universal body and the energy body and layer them on top of each other. If you are a cell in the body of the universe and that cell is clenched, it's hoarding, it's isolated, what happens to the rest of the organism? It becomes sick. You see this at the level of the human body. When a cell in your body decides it doesn't want to participate in circulation anymore, we call it cancer. To understand how this plays out on the level of our physical reality, look at how systems break down when they succumb to this separatist delusion. So imagine there are 3 kingdoms that share a single island, and they have a system of interdependence. Kingdom A sits on the water supply. They have a spring. Kingdom B and C supplies labor and minerals that keep the island's technology running. It was a symbiotic metabolic system. Everything worked perfectly. Then a survivalist leader took leadership in Kingdom A, and he decided that a drought was coming. He decided that he doesn't want to share his water resources with the other kingdom. After all, they are not the same. He decided that his kingdom needed to hoard. He decided that his kingdom needed leverage. His root level contraction manifested. So what did the leader do? He built a dam. He closed the pipes, they stopped the circulation. But because the water stopped flowing to kingdoms B and C, they began to suffer. Those two kingdoms began to slowly die. And when they died, the mines stopped working. When the mines stopped working, kingdoms B and C could not supply labor anymore. They could not supply minerals. Within a year, the power grid in Kingdom A failed because there were no minerals coming in to maintain the batteries. The high-tech filtration system, which cleaned the very water that they were hoarding, broke down because the parts and labor came from the other kingdoms. Kingdom A sat on a reservoir of water that they could not use because it had become stagnant and toxic. By trying to survive in isolation, they ensured their own extinction. Look at the world around you today. Look at the hoarding, the greed, the economic depression, the isolation, the separation. What is that but a collection of individual root chakras locked in survival mode? What is that but billions of cells clutching its energy, refusing to circulate, believing that they are separate from the whole? The suffering of the world is not a punishment from God, like some people would like to say. It's a symptom of the parts, nations, individuals, cells operating in isolation, forgetting that they belong to an interdependent whole. So how do we fix this? How do we move from a clenched fist to an open hand? Let's start with a radical reframing of what creation actually is from the context I'm speaking. Creation isn't merely just production of art or whatever. In the context of a single unitary interdependent system, creation is an act of release. It is the pressure valve opening. When you realize that you're full of life force and you allow that life force, aka energy, aka libido, to keep rising from the roots into the sacral, into the solar plexus, into the heart and upward, that is flow. That is circulation. And as a result of this circulation, creation in its most watered down sense becomes a given. You become the body of the universe expressing itself through your specific coordinates. And all of this ripples outwards into the collective. Keep in mind that you can't relax your survival fist by trying to get more. You cannot heal your root chakra by trying to get more money, more love, more followers, more resources, more leverage. An individuated system relaxes when it realizes that it is not separate from an endless, infinite, interconnected source, and that source is abundance. When that realization lands, not just as a thought, but as a cellular embodied knowing, circulation happens and the system heals itself. If you are a condensation of source, you cannot be rejected by source, because source cannot reject itself. Pause, think. I want you to sit with all I've said for a moment. Let it sink in. And tonight, when you lie down, I want you to try something, a different type of meditation. I want you to meditate at source, or scratch that. Let me call it source embodiment meditation. Feel your root chakra anchor into the earth. Feel the earth anchor into the solar system. Feel that system anchor into the galaxy. And feel the galaxy dissolve into the infinite body of existence. And as you feel all of that, ask yourself something. Ask yourself, what does the universe want to create through me now that it knows that it is safe? Okay, if something in this video touched you, acknowledge it, leave a comment. Because conversation is circulation, and circulation is how systems heal. Subscribe if you want more conversations like this. See you on the other side.